Hello, and welcome to Beginner's Guide, 8 Steps to Sterling Prose. This course will help you to become a better writer in several ways. It will tighten your prose, it will make your prose pop, and it will help you to improve your technique so that you can stand out above your competition, make the sale, get the writing published, and get the attention and success that you deserve. So if you would like to make your resume stand out, or if you would like to get your cover letter to the top of the stack, if you would like to sell that novel, if you would like to have copywriting that brings people to your website and sells your product, if you want to become a better writer creatively or academically, then this course is for you. If you're someone that's on the go and doesn't have a lot of time, then this course is also for you. It is a shortened, light version of my other course, Become a Professional Writer. So if you don't have a lot of time, if you're wondering if that course may be for you and you'd like to have a low-risk way to experiment and explore the writing techniques in the larger course, or if you would like to just become a better writer and improve yourself and put yourself out there better, then this course is for you. This course contains clips from the course Become a Professional Writer. And it's a shortened version for those with time constraints, those that want to see if they want to take a longer course and if it's for them. And so also I want people to reap the benefits of what I've done. My goal and my mission is to help people tighten their prose, to help people achieve their professional goals. I understand the frustrations of what it's like to try really hard at something and not understand why you're not getting the results you want. And so if I can help somebody to get the results that they want, to see the successes that they've been seeking and craving, then I have done my job. And I find it very gratifying to hear success stories, to hear how people have been helped by courses I've designed. And so my goal is to help you and to get this course out to as many people as possible to benefit from the material. So if there's someone you know that you think might enjoy this course or might benefit from it, please share this with them. And what's unique about me is I have a master's degree in English literature, and I also have a bachelor's degree in it. And then I also have a master's degree in fine arts in creative writing. Those backgrounds, in addition to 12 years of university experience teaching writing, give me extensive background in assessing what works and what doesn't work in writing, in working with people one-on-one to help them improve their writing style and do it in a way where I tailor it to their needs, and also in helping people based on the designs that I've come up with from the courses that I've taught in the past. And that's where this course design comes in. And so this course I believe is designed from a perspective of a professional who has extensive experience teaching thousands of students how to write, evaluating their writing, and showing them specifically in action how to put into practice those improved writing techniques. And so this course will help you in the sense that it is designed in a way that is to maximize effectiveness. First, we start with very fundamental nuts and bolts type things. We start with how to improve words. How do we tighten word usage and improve word economy? And then we move to sentences, and that is how to structure sentences and make them flow in a way for maximum effect. Because how you structure a sentence will actually impact how it affects the reader. And then we go to general structures, where we start putting sentences together and how do we improve and maximize the effect of those. And then we go into paragraphs, which we talk about how to do intros, how to do conclusions, and how do you do paragraph breaks and organize ideas in a way where you make ideas flow, you make them clear, and you make them pop. Then we move into larger, more global issues. So everything continues to feed into larger, wide types of writing contexts. And then we go to purpose and presentation. Purpose is, what is my purpose for this piece? What am I trying to get across to the reader? How am I going to engage them, and how is it going to be meaningful to them and in the sense that I'm showing that something is meaningful to me. And so once we do purpose and presentation, then what's unique about this course is we also talk about habits and attitudes. And that's something that a lot of the similar courses don't necessarily cover. And you can't have all these techniques unless you have a daily practice of how to put them into practice. And so we talk about attitudes towards your writing and specific habits that will help you to maximize the success and the benefits and the outcomes that you see in the course so that you can get real results. This course is also designed where we have exercises and quizzes, and those exercises and quizzes are meant to put what you are learning in the course into practice. Even though this is a concise version and specific strategies that stand out, the highlights of the larger course are included in here. The exercises are unique from the other course, and you can put all of these strategies into practice right away by using the exercises and quizzes, and you can reinforce your knowledge from the lectures. And so this course also has ways to put things into practice so you can reap the benefits in a real way in addition to the habits and attitudes. This course can benefit all writers at all levels, but specifically people that want to make their writing stand out, people that submit writing for publication, copywriters, journalists, bloggers, people that are doing websites and things like that, trying to sell products and maximize their capacity for selling things. If you're trying to improve yourself academically or professionally or just as a hobby so you can improve yourself for your own sake, those are all the kinds of writers that will benefit from this course. So let's go ahead and get started, and I look forward to seeing you in the course. Hello, and welcome to Strategy 1, Words. This course is set up into 8 sections, or actually 4 sections, but there are 2 different strategies in each section. The first one is on the sentence level, and that one includes words and sentences. The second section is on more of a paragraph and sort of structural level, and that includes paragraphs and other forms of structure in your writing piece. And the third one includes more of a global focus on a whole writing piece, and that one is on purpose and presentation. And then the fourth one is more looking at your writing as a whole, and it steps back even further, and that one is on habits and attitudes. And so this course doesn't just cover nuts and bolts of sentence level writing, which it does, but it also incorporates attitudes and habits that can help you to be a better writer as well. In this first section on words, William Zinsser, one of my personal heroes, a great American writer and the writer of a book called On Writing Well, he states that you need to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. And if there's a simpler or more effective way to word something, do so. Eliminate unneeded words. And the reason for that is when we're writing, when we're speaking actually, we say a lot of qualifiers, adverbs, nouns, adjectives, weak words, and constructions. And that's fine when we're talking if we're not in a formal setting. But we tend to write how we talk. And since we tend to do this, it's important to make sure that we don't come across that way on the page, especially when we're writing a formal piece or a piece of fiction or a piece of poetry. In most cases, you want it to be as tight and compressed as possible. You want to have it pop. You want to have strong word economy. And the way to do that is to follow the strategies here to cut repetitive words and phrases. The explanation for that is when you use words and phrases multiple times, cut redundant ones or replace them with synonyms or pronouns to avoid redundancy. So it also means to cut repetition. If you keep saying something over and over again, try to think of maybe a pronoun, like if you keep saying John did this and John did that, think of saying he or him some. Or if there's a synonym to a word that you're using over and over, like you're writing a paper on child abuse, instead of saying child abuse, child abuse, child abuse, child abuse, you could just say abuse, or you could state it in some other way. So if there's a way that you can simplify something and cut repetition, please do so. And I mentioned William Zinsser earlier. He is a famous American writer. He's a journalist, he's a writing teacher, and he's one of the most renowned and influential writing teachers and nonfiction writers in American history, especially in the 20th century. William Zinsser has a technique called the bracket technique. And if you check out some of his books, especially on writing well, he explains how he uses the bracket technique and how you can transfer that to your own writing. What he says, though, is that put brackets around anything not doing useful work. So once you get done with a draft, a completed rough draft, you should go through your piece, print it out on paper, and have a pen or a pencil and go through it, and knowing some of these strategies that we've talked about, the adverbs, the adjectives, the descriptors and qualifiers, wordy things that are being repetitive, not only on the word level but also on the sentence level and even on the global level and in between, on every level. Take a pen and put brackets around anything not doing useful work, anything that doesn't do anything different or unique from everything else on the page. And then he states that most drafts can be cut by 50% in On Writing Well. Print your work, get a pen, and put brackets around all such words, phrases, and sentences. That allows you to return to it and decide if you need to cut. Most of us are very attached to our writing. It's a very personal process, and so we're very closed off and protective of it, kind of like we are our emotional selves and our personal lives, and that's understandable. It's a very vulnerable process. There's no doubt that writing is a very vulnerable process. And so you need to be compassionate with yourself when you do it, but there's also a certain amount of brutality and firmness that you need to have in your writing as well. And so those brackets are almost like a little protective wall around that piece. And so you're not cutting it yet. You're just thinking, I may not need this. And so then when you go back and look at it, you've already thought about it, and so then cutting it may make more sense. And so it's also a little psychological trick to help you to cut things if you have trouble with that. Some people don't, but some people do. And so then you can say, well, I don't need that. And so you can cut it and you're more okay with that. So once you go back, decide what needs to be cut, and there may be some things that you realize do their own work and they're useful. And so, but you do need to be brutal and cut what is unnecessary. So use William Zinsser's bracket technique, and the gist of it is to, once you get a copy of your draft, look at it with a pen, go through it, and put brackets around anything not doing useful work. An example, if you look at the example, it says, Larry walked slowly through the door. As he went through the door, he gazed longingly back at Isabel, who kind of looked heartbroken. And then what I did here was put brackets around anything that may not be doing useful work. Is it really necessary? Is it saying anything new? So it's taking all of these strategies, all these techniques, I should say, techniques 1 through 7, and culminating them into this practice of the bracket technique. And keep in mind there will be other techniques in other strategies that we're doing that you may also want to use to help you with the bracket technique as well. But a correction to the sentence, ultimately everything that was bracketed was cut in this sentence, but here's how the sentence became streamlined. As Larry lingered at the door, he gazed at Isabel, whose sad eyes returned his expression. We still get the meaning of the emotional exchange between these two individuals, but we get it in a much more efficient, precise, and clear way, and it still engages the reader. It leaves a little mystery, but it also lets us know that these two people obviously have deep feelings for each other, and there's a lot of complexity there, and there's obviously something larger than them pulling them apart. And so you get the clarity of the meaning in that sentence without all those unnecessary qualifiers, adverbs, and things like that. The first one was walk slowly. Larry lingered in the door obviously means he's going slowly. As he went through the door, we've already said that because he went through the door, so it's being said twice. It's not necessary. He gazed longingly back at Isabel. He gazed at Isabel. And her sad eyes were returning his gaze, so we know that he's looking back at her. And then lastly, heartbroken, we can tell based on the expressions and the body language what the emotions in this situation probably are. And you can apply all those others to the bracket techniques to help you in your actual writing process. So I will see you in strategy 2, and I hope that you've enjoyed strategy 1. Hello, and welcome to strategy 2, sentences. In the last strategy, we worked on the word level, and in this strategy, we're going to build on that. You can almost see this whole class or this whole course as a scaffolding or a building, a sequencing of different things. And you need the first one in order to establish the second one, in order to establish the third one, kind of like a geometry proof or something. But in this strategy, we have 3 techniques, and they are actually in the explanation to strategy 2. Strategy 2 simply states, activate your sentences. Activate your sentences. And the explanation for that is to use active voice, prefer action verbs, and limit your use of passive verbs. Active forms and verbs streamline weak structures and clarify vague ones. So when you use passive voice, for example, you are not sure what's being done to what and who's doing what to whom or to what. And so it can get very unclear in terms of subjects and objects, but when it comes to using active voice, it's direct, it's strong, it activates your sentence just like the strategy suggests. Once again, it is not an absolute rule. In some situations, you may actually want to use passive voice if you want to emphasize something being done to someone. For example, if someone is being victimized, using passive voice emphasizes that more. But in most cases, you want to use active voice. Active voice identifies what's being done to whom. It activates your sentence. It makes it more action-oriented. It streamlines it, and it makes it more clear and precise of what's being done to whom and why. And so in terms of using active voice, the explanation states, use active voice unless you are emphasizing the object of the action or there is no other way to express an idea. In some cases, you'll also find it difficult to express it in another way. And if that's the case, fine, don't worry about it. But keep in mind that usually there's a better way to word something in the active voice. But passive voice often creates ambivalence and weakness. Active voice clarifies meaning and strengthens tone. A good example here, a simple example, the ball was caught by Samantha. That emphasizes the ball instead of the action. And so a better way to activate the sentence would be to say, Samantha caught the ball. It's stronger, it's more precise, it's more streamlined, and the meaning is much more clear. And so that's an activated sentence. When possible, and when it's better, use active voice. Hello, and welcome to Strategy 3 in the second section. The second section covers structures and paragraphs, and it builds on what we were talking about in the last section and in the last 2 strategies. Strategy 1 was words, and strategy 2 was sentences. And now we're building from those more brass tacks, smaller structures and components into what those become, where words become sentences and sentences become paragraphs and paragraphs become overall structures. And structure is a looser term that's used in a way that is anything that's not a paragraph or any combination of paragraphs. So strategy 3 is structures, and strategy 3 says pace and order words and sentences for appropriate emphasis. Notice that we're still talking about words and sentences, but we're talking about how they're used overall as a whole when you put them together and their effect there. An explanation of strategy 3, use word order and sentence pace to impact emphasis, mood, and flow of ideas. Your word order does influence the emphasis and the mood and the flow of your ideas, as does the sentence pace. The sentence pace can have a different influence on emotions, on emphasis, on what you're trying to make the reader get out of that particular situation. And so pace and order your words for appropriate emphasis. Vary lengths for appropriate pace and flow. Vary sentence lengths for appropriate appropriate pace and flow. The explanation here is to vary sentence lengths for increased effect, mix short, medium, and long sentences to create a lyrical flow. In most cases, it's appropriate to mix some short and simple sentences in with some longer, complex sentences. It creates a nice organic flow. As a writing instructor, I've seen students that used both extremes. They might have used a lot of short, choppy sentences, and it just had this it was just a pace about it that was hard to follow because it was just choppy and the technique wasn't natural, and so it didn't have that nice flow to it that was organic and natural. Likewise, I've also had students that would have these long tangled sentences that were hard to follow, and so sometimes you would get lost in the thought and forget where you began, and so sometimes those can be hard to follow as well. So it just depends on the situation, but in most cases you want to vary your sentence lengths. Mix in some short sentences with some long ones. Think about what you're trying to say and how you're trying to break it up. Where do you need to have a pause or a breath in the ideas? So strategy 3 is to pace and order words and sentences for appropriate emphasis. And that emphasis is both in terms of what you want to be emphatic, what you want to stand out in the sentence for your reader, but also the emotional effect and the just rhythm of it. Sentences have a flow and a rhythm to them, and then when there's that nice organic mixture of sentences, it has that lyrical quality that we're talking about. Strategy 3, structures. Technique 2 states that you want to start sentences with a subject and an action verb. Like always, this is not a catch-all, but it is something that you want to try to do more often, as much as possible. Start sentences with a subject and an action verb. And the reason for that is because you want to allow weaker constructions to follow the subject and the verb. That puts the emphasis on the subject and the verb. And usually, in most cases, that is what you're emphasizing, the subject and the verb. And that's what you want to put first, because that puts it in the reader's mind first. Experts call such sentences right branching, mostly because the descriptors and minor words come after the subject and the verb. Not all well-written sentences follow that structure, but writers like Steinbeck, known for tight prose, use that technique frequently. So trying to use the subject and the verb first, emphasize what you want to emphasize at the beginning. So the reader is left with those thoughts, which is start sentences with a subject and an action verb, and that will increase the strength of your sentences, the emphasis of them, and give them that tight feel that everybody wants in their writing. Place words of emphasis at the end of the sentence. Now, you might be scratching your head thinking, doesn't that contradict what was said before? And that would be a reasonable thing to assume at first. But when you look at the explanation, it clarifies it a little more. And this is from classic grammar scholarship and classic grammar sentence diagramming. And this is how you should emphasize the words in your sentences. And by the way, if you spend time working on tight poetry, even if you're not a poet, it makes you a better prose writer because you're forced to compress your language, you're forced to compress your words, you're forced to simplify without dumbing down. And then, so for poetry, this also applies to place words of emphasis in specific places in the line. So it says, building on the previous technique, the elements of style states, and the elements of style is a classic handbook and technique of style writing, and it's been around for a long time. It says, place emphatic words or words for emphasis in a sentence at the end. Place emphatic words in a sentence at the end. In other words, emphatic words should go at the beginning and end of a sentence. So remember it this way: 2, 3, 1. Start the sentence with the second most emphatic phrase. So you're still starting it with what you want to emphasize, but it might not be what you emphasize the most. Hide the weak elements in the middle and then put the most important words last. When you have a compound or a complex sentence, this especially holds true, and if you take some of your sentences that aren't structured this way and restructure them, once again, there are exceptions, but in most cases you'll find that your sentence flows better, that you're trying to, it's more on an unconscious level for the reader, but when you consciously change the structure of the sentence in this way, you'll find that your writing flows better and your sentences are stronger. And so follow the 2-3-1 emphasis, 2 being the second most emphasized element in the sentence, 3 being the most minor, and 1 being the most emphatic idea, word, or phrase in the sentence. Emphasize what needs to be emphasized the most at the end of the sentence. When you take it in the context of the previous technique to emphasize what's at the beginning, you put them together, it makes a lot more sense. Look at the context of the situation and see what needs to be emphasized. Allow punctuation to set the pace. Allow punctuation to set the pace. I once wrote a piece of nonfiction, and it was satire, and I used each type of punctuation as a character, and each character followed the characteristics that it is given in grammar, in language, and in sentences. For example, a question mark is a hunched over, bent over, tired person who doesn't ever have any confidence and doesn't declare anything straight out. And then an exclamation point is erect, sure, confident, loud, and in some cases too aggressive. And so each particular kind of punctuation obviously emphasizes a particular kind of rhythm, a particular kind of lyric, a particular kind of emotion, or a particular kind of emphasis. And so allow punctuation to set the pace. The explanation here is punctuation isn't just rules. It sets the reader's pace and groups words, phrases, and sentences. So it's not just grammatical rules, but there's a finer craft to it that you want to think about in terms of the context of a situation, making the right choice. It's not always right or wrong, even though in many cases it is because it's grammar, but it's also technique, just like we're talking about here through this whole series of talks. Use punctuation creatively. Periods create stops, commas create pauses, dashes create longer pauses for emphasis, and semicolons stop ideas for a moment. So an example here, you've probably seen on Facebook or in other places some of those silly memes about how important punctuation is. So I'll use one of those. Note the difference. Neither one is correct or incorrect, but the meaning is different because of the punctuation. In this one, when do we eat grandma? Question mark. When do we eat grandma? And then the other one, when do we eat, comma, grandma? When do we eat grandma? In that case, commas are very important because I don't know about you, but I'm not going to eat my grandma. And then in the other case, grandmother is obviously cooking dinner and you're asking her when are we going to eat? And that one is fine. So punctuation can save lives in many cases. Keep in mind that punctuation can set the pace of a sentence or a set of sentences, and so think about what each particular kind of punctuation does, where it's appropriate. For example, if you use a semicolon instead of a dash, you're going to have more of a stop in the middle of a sentence. A dash is more of a long pause. So think about how where your line breaks, your sentence breaks, and your different punctuation in the particular situation where it might be correct in more than one way. Think very consciously about the kind of punctuation you're putting in terms of the pace and the emphasis. It's like driving. Is it a stop sign? Is it a speed bump? Is it a maybe a roadblock? So think about how you need to pace that for the emphasis and for the emotional effect, the rhythm, the poetry, and the lyrics of your sentence. Hi, and welcome to Strategy 4, Paragraphs. This strategy has 4 techniques, and it covers paragraphs in terms of how to organize them and how to set them up and what they should emphasize and how they should function. Organize paragraphs with clear plans and subheadings. Now that may seem like common sense, but there are some specific techniques here that can really help you in terms of your organization, in terms of your paragraph structure, in terms of deciding how long to make a paragraph, what to put in it, how to unify it, and where to break your paragraph. That's often a question that I get from my students a lot. Where do I break my paragraphs? And that's a good question, and we'll talk about that. Strategy 4, though, the explanation. Each paragraph should have a specific goal and or key idea, and its form should fit its function. Each paragraph should have a specific goal or key idea, and its form should fit its function. Use signposts to clarify the organization of your work. Use signposts to clarify the organization of your work. The explanation here is to use headings, subheadings, and topic sentences to clarify organization for readers. For yourself, use outlines, informal plans, storyboards, and idea maps to clarify organization. And so it's different depending on if you're talking about behind the scenes or in terms of for your reader. But if you have a longer work, I strongly encourage you to use subheadings. They give a reader a sense of each section. It makes it easier to read. It breaks it down and clarifies it for you and for the reader, and they know how every piece interrelates in sort of a sequence or a narrative that ties together in the larger scope of the work. So please use signposts to clarify the organization of your work because it's very helpful for your readers. An example of that, and this is harder to really have like an actual example from a work, but something you can do is write a draft and then work from an outline from the draft after that. That may seem counterintuitive, but it can help you identify corrections you need to make to organization. What gaps are missing in the ideas here? Once you have a draft, if you do an outline, you'll see what's missing because it's not there. Hello, and welcome to Strategy 5, which is the next section of the course. The next section includes purpose and presentation. Purpose is Strategy 5 and presentation is Strategy 6. Strategy 5 purpose states, plan your work around one key idea or question. So basically the gist of that is to have one clear main idea in your piece. There are exceptions to that like anything, but most of the time, regardless of your genre, you will have one key idea around your piece. And it may be a direct thesis statement depending on your genre, like if it's nonfiction or an essay, but it may also be more subtle than that. Even in fiction though, you want to have a central theme or a central idea, a central event, or something, some key idea or question that the whole piece revolves around. And so planning your work around one key idea or question is important. An explanation for that. For example, in fiction or nonfiction, generally it does have a main idea. Consider this the engine that pulls the train along, or consider it the thread that runs through the whole work to create a unifying element throughout the piece. So those are two metaphors that a lot of people can understand. I like to think of it as a train, and it's the engine that pulls the train along, and all of the cars that come behind the train are in some way connected to it. There's something that keeps them connected or linked together, and then at the end the caboose is still connected, because if there's a disconnect, then the engine may exist, but it's going to pull along and leave some of the cars behind. So it's really important to have that unifying element that goes through all of your work. In a work of fiction, for example, the character has a driving need to create something she doesn't have, to eliminate something she doesn't want, or to change a condition for the better, or maybe to get something that she, like I said, something that she doesn't have that she would like to have. A central theme or a central focus, that thread that unifies all the events in the storyline. And like I said, in nonfiction, that could be a thesis, and everything else in that would in some way point back to that, support that, or summarize that in some way. So the unifying work or key idea or key question that drives a piece should be present in most pieces of fiction and nonfiction. Hello, and welcome to Strategy 6. We're moving right along as the Muppets sing. I say that to my students and they'll snicker sometimes. But moving right along, under Strategy 6, we have presentation, and the strategy for this one is to clarify your rhetorical situation, plan your unities, and stick with them. Clarify your rhetorical situation, and your rhetorical situation includes your genre, your voice, your audience, your all of those things that create what your story is and how you're going to present it, your purpose, your main idea. Plan your unities, and unities are things like tone to a degree, pronoun reference, tense, verb tense, and things like that. And then stick with them. Understand your audience, purpose, and tone from the beginning. Plan your point of view, verb tense, pronoun references, etc., and keep them consistent throughout, unless there's a specific reason to change them. Of course, if you are in present tense and then you go into a story that's in past tense, there's a clear reason for changing that particular unity. And unities, like I said, are all those things that you want to think about ahead of time that usually stay consistent throughout a piece. And so think about what those are, plan them consciously, and then stick with them throughout. And then when you go back and revise, go through and make sure that all of those unities are staying consistent, because it's very easy to get wonky and to shift into another point of view, because once again, we tend to write how we speak and we shift back and forth when we're speaking. And so it's really important to work on keeping that consistent throughout. Once again, that's one of my weaknesses. I have to constantly, I'll go through and look through something 4 times and I'm like, I've got this right. And I'll find a point of view that's still in past tense that should be in present, or vice versa, or something like that, or a pronoun reference that's off. And I'm like, I just looked at that. So it's really good and really important to go through it several times. Plan your unities and stick with them. Plan your unities and stick with them. Probably the first question that people will have in this particular technique is, what is a unity? And that's a good question. A unity would be something like a pronoun reference, a point of view, a verb tense, mood, tone, and style. Those are things that they're called unities because you want to pick one and then stick with it throughout your piece. So if you say use past tense and there's no reason to shift into present tense, if there is, you would want to do that. But if you're in past tense and you stay in past tense, that's a unity because you're unifying the tense throughout the piece and keeping it consistent. And so just to repeat some of those, pronoun reference, point of view, like first person, second person, third person, that kind of overlaps with pronoun reference, I, you, we. Tense, tone, and sometimes tone shifts, it just depends on the situation, and style. And those are some of the things you want to try to keep consistent throughout the piece. And some of them also overlap with some of the other techniques and some of the other strategies that we have talked about or we will talk about. So try to keep them consistent unless there's a specific reason to shift them. To clarify the rhetorical situation and stick with it. So it's the same concept as clarifying your unities and sticking with them and being consistent. Having that thread that runs through something that stays consistent. The rhetorical situation, very rarely will you shift it like you might a verb tense or a pronoun reference if the context of the situation changes. So your rhetorical situation, usually it will stay the same. And the rhetorical situation includes your purpose, your thesis, your audience, your genre, and so on. And so those are the global concepts in your piece when we talk about your rhetorical situation. And also, what are you trying to get across to the reader? That goes along with your thesis, or if you don't have a direct thesis, what that driving force or that driving question is throughout a piece, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. But you want to balance, clarify your rhetorical situation and stick with it. Choose your purpose, thesis, audience, and genre and be true to them throughout. Clarify the rhetorical situation and stick with it. Hi, and welcome back. We are in the last section of the course. Can you believe it? It's moved very quickly. We are in the last section, which includes attitudes and habits. This is one thing that makes this particular course unique. Some of them will have writing strategies and nuts and bolts instructions and grammatical and style instructions, but a lot of them don't include habits and attitudes, and I think that's a really important section to go with the style, to go with the grammatical instructions on how to improve your writing style, because I think that there's a lot of overlap there, and there's a lot of just things that your habits and attitudes feed into those. And so strategy 7 is attitudes. And strategy 7 is to set realistic expectations and trust your instincts. Set realistic expectations and trust your instincts. Be realistic about what you can accomplish. That's one of the main things that I've had a problem with, is that I want to try to take on too much. I want my work to be perfect, and it can't do either of those things. And so that's one thing that some of the things we're going to talk about in the attitude section here. Also, break larger tasks into smaller ones and trust your own voice, instincts, and interests. So be realistic about what you can accomplish, break larger tasks into smaller ones, and trust your own voice, instincts, and interests. Know your voice. Being true to yourself, trusting your instincts, knowing who you are. It's a very important process in life, but almost everything that you do in life you also want to apply to your writing life. Writing is a great metaphor for life in that way. Know your voice is one of the important things, just like know thyself. Explanation. Even if you write in various genres and subjects, keep a certain you-ness in everything that you write. Keep your voice in each piece of writing and don't change it to fit the piece, though other elements will change. Now let me clarify here. The style of each piece will change according to the rhetorical situation. Your tone will change. Your attitude will even change, but there's a certain you-ness, like I said, that you want to keep throughout, where you're you and where you don't compromise who you are in order to create a piece. Once again, try new things, experiment, figure out who that you is, and that you may evolve. But when you know who you are, try to be consistent with that and be true to that. Because when you try to be like somebody else, or I'm not saying don't imitate good writers, but when you suppress who you really are in your writing, you're denying the world the wonderful uniqueness that is you. And if you think about other writers and ones that are very unique, or singers or artists that have their own unique flavor, signature, style, color, emotion, what would our world be like without Shakespeare's uniqueness? What would it be like without Toni Morrison's uniqueness, or Picasso's, or Bach's, or Mozart's? It would be, or Bob Marley. I mean, the world would just be a lot less colorful. I'm just very grateful and very thankful that those artists were very true to themselves and they let their own uniqueness come through, because that's what made their music and their art beautiful. And it applies to writing, life, and all forms of art. But be true to your identity and your voice and your heritage. That doesn't mean that you cannot write different people, cultures, and experiences, but your voice should be uniquely yours. Read diverse, eloquent writers and you'll get a clear picture that no voice is the same. Shakespeare and Toni Morrison are both celebrated authors, both worlds apart. Give the world the enjoyment of your unique voice. Write what you care about. And the explanation for that is write what interests you. Most people have a lot of different kinds of interests, and some people have a very focused interest, but whatever is interesting to you, focus on that. Many people believe certain subjects that they love are dumb as writing pieces. For example, if you love skateboarding, you're like, who would want to read a piece about skateboarding? But some of the best pieces that I've ever read were subjects that I didn't think I was interested in, but the writer made me interested in them. That passion, that engagement that we've talked about, if you care about something and it comes out in your writing, your reader will know that. And so that's what we're talking about here. So if you think something is dumb, if you engage in the topic, your reader will also. There's really not a lot of topics that are dumb. It depends on how you present the topic. An example, if you love cats and are engaged in writing a piece on this subject, your reader is also more likely to be engaged in the writing as well. Especially if you can connect it to universal themes and things that connect everybody together. For example, I'm reading a book by Laura Hildenbrand called Unbroken, and it's about a World War II veteran. He just recently passed away, and he was in the Olympics as a runner, and then he became a POW in a Japanese war camp. Well, I love World War II, but I don't necessarily like to read biographies about that. But the way her voice is in the piece and the way she makes it come to life it engages me because of how she writes it. And if you can bring that to your writing, you can engage the reader in subjects that maybe they didn't think they were interested in either. And the next thing you know, you've got somebody's grandmother reading a piece on skateboarding because it's funny and it's engaging and it's genuine and it's well written and well constructed. And so just write what you care about. Often your engagement is what keeps the reader reading, not the subject, but because the interest comes through in the writing. If you are engaged, they will be engaged as well. Hello, we are on our last strategy. Hard to believe, isn't it? Strategy 8 is habits. And attitudes comes before habits in our lives, and so I thought it was good and important to incorporate habits last here as well. It just makes a lot of sense to take all of the things that we've learned and talk about how to put those good techniques into practice. Attitudes create habits, and the last strategy is create healthy habits in your writing life. That's one of those that's obvious, but create healthy habits in your writing life. The explanation, good writing habits incorporate specific daily practices and choices. They incorporate specific practices and choices. Do free writing to tackle writer's block and stay in practice. So free writing is basically where you write stream of conscious, anything that comes to mind on a specific topic or prompt. Most of the time you do want to have specific questions, topics, or prompts in mind, and then you just get a pen. You could type it on the computer, and it's sort of a speed writing. You don't have to write fast. The most important thing is to keep your hand moving. Keep your hand moving and don't stop. If your mind gets caught or you panic or you go blank, it's good to actually write whatever your last sentence was again and again and just kind of relax and drop back down into the process and then continue your free write. You're not worried about what you're saying. You're not worried about it being perfect. You're not even worried about spelling or grammar or anything like that. If it's incorrect, that's okay, as long as you can make out what you're saying. And then it gives you something to work with. It's not even a draft, but it might be a paragraph or a sentence or an idea. It might give you clarification on your topic. But free writing is a great habit to have for writers that are constantly trying to generate ideas and generate material. It's a great way to do that, and it's sort of a backdoor approach so that you're not overthinking it. The explanation for this, free writing involves writing stream of conscious, anything that comes to mind on a specific subject, prompt, or question. Imagine a current flowing from your mind or from your brain to your hand. And so this current goes from your brain through your arm down into your hand. And basically, you write whatever comes to mind, honest, uncensored, and unedited. You can always do that later for your audience. Making this a daily practice is a powerful tool. And when I was a beginning writer in my first creative writing class, it changed my entire perspective on writing. And so free writing is something that you might want to consider making a daily practice, or maybe doing it before each time you sit down to write, just to get your mind clear or to come up with ideas or think about what you need to focus on in that particular writing session. Prepare in advance for a writing piece. Prepare in advance for a writing piece. Once again, that's one of those that seems obvious, but a lot of times in practice it doesn't necessarily happen. If something comes out and if it's spontaneous, and we've all had those wonderful spontaneous artistic moments where we're inspired and we get this idea and it just flows. And that's not what I'm talking about here. If that happens, you should go with that. But in terms of writing a piece formally, maybe you've already had that moment and then you need to go back and work on it and refine the piece into something that's more structured and more shaped and more refined. The explanation for that is to do research, gather information, and outline ahead of time, especially when under deadlines. If you're a student, if you're a journalist, or if you have a publisher that's expecting something from you, or if you're a blogger and you have a weekly blog, it's important it's important to make sure that you plan your work and work your plan. And so prepare in advance as much as you can, and it saves you time later on. Example, before starting a piece, consider these elements. What is your purpose? That's one of the most important things in the rhetorical process. What is your purpose? What are you writing? Why are you writing the piece? It's always important to kind of step back and look at it from a bird's eye view, from above. Why are you writing the piece? What do you want to accomplish? Maybe you need to make some money or something, but there still needs to be, or maybe your teacher told you to, but there always needs to be a genuine reason. And that's what I tell my students. I say, I don't want you to just write this piece because I'm telling you to, because it's for a grade. If you engage genuinely in the piece and you find your own reason for why you're writing the piece, it's going to come through in your writing. You're going to do better, and you're going to get a better grade probably. So those are all things to think about. What is your purpose? Why are you writing the piece? And the last one, what does the piece say that is significant about life, society, or the human condition? Discover what you need to say through your writing. Discover what you need to say through your writing. A lot of people that have been immersed in writing for years know this. And it seems kind of obvious in a sense too, but in high school, most students are taught that they need to write a paper about something. They sit down to write it, and then, okay, I'm done. I just need to go back and edit a few grammar errors, and I'm done. But that is a big misconception, and almost all my students are conditioned that way. And so what I have to teach them is that writing is a process, and that you don't discover or think about what you want to say and then write it, even though that's partly true. But that even more importantly, you have to discover what you need to say through your writing process. Many have the misconception that you discover what you need to say and then write. But writing a draft helps you discover what you need to say. Use the first draft as a discovery process. You probably know that you've written things and you're like, cha-ching, aha, eureka, I get it. And things come out and you're like, this is good, this is a great idea. So you're figuring it out as you're writing that. And then future drafts will help you to articulate what you learn. And that's why multiple drafts are so important. I can't think of very many exceptions to the need for multiple drafts. There's always that rare piece or poem that comes out almost perfect the first time. You tweak it a little bit, it's done, but that's extremely rare. At least from my experience, from my students, from my experience as a writer as well, that's extremely rare. And so let that first draft, and this could be after you've done your initial free writing if you choose to do that, or brainstorming, and then you just draft however you do that the first time. Let that be what's called a discovery draft. And then your future drafts will help you to continue to discover other things you need to say, and it also, you'll start tweaking and start refining in some of the later drafts. So a strategy for doing this, if it's helpful, free write on your topic and outline to generate ideas first, and then write a discovery draft second to allow your mind to explore what needs to be said. Next, write as many later drafts as needed to articulate, refine, and further clarify what needs to be said. Even later drafts can be discovery drafts. And keep in mind that you may go back and forth through this scale or this sequence of things. It's not 1, 2, 3. You might overlap some of this. You might free write after your first or your second draft. Whatever works, do that. There's not a specific order where all of this has to go. Often, though, the best work comes from the unconscious and seems to write itself. And we've all probably had that experience if we've done any significant writing as well. Lastly, revise once you have done multiple drafts. Several drafts are almost always necessary for a work to reach its full potential. This is why writers use revision, R-E-V-I-S-I-O-N. It means literally to vision again, to picture it again, to look at it from a different light, what needs to be said. And so just remember to discover what you need to say through the writing, through that first draft. And remember that writing isn't a finished product. It is, but it's never completely done. We all probably know this as well. But keep in mind that it's a process and it's ongoing and it continues to improve, just like life. None of us are perfect. We make mistakes. We do stupid and dumb things. We've all done that. I know I have. And having that experience, then you go into something the next time in a similar situation in light of that, and you know some things that you didn't know before. And that's what that discovery draft, that's the gift that it gives you. And that's why it's so important to know that writing is a process just like life is. And so it's a journey, not a destination. So discover what you need to say through your writing. Hello. That's it. We made it through the course. Congratulations. Thank you for taking the time to go on this journey with me, and thank you for taking the time for yourself to value your own writing, to make a step forward in your own progress as a writer so that you can achieve those goals, so that you can start seeing results if you've been frustrated or stuck or you've been at a plateau. I hope that this course will help you, once you put it into practice, to see the results that you haven't been seeing, to get that cover letter to the top of the stack, to sell that product, to get attention that you deserve, to beat out your competition. I hope that this course will help you to achieve your goals. Some of the things that the course covered, we discussed how to tighten word usage. Then we went into sentence structures and how those can impact the reader, the mood, the emotions, and the pace. And then we talked about structures and how sentence structures can be maximized for higher effect. And then we discussed paragraphs and how you can use paragraph breaks, introductions, conclusions, and organization, as well as signposts to mark the reader your intentions and what you plan to say in a piece, as well as making it easy to go through a piece. And then we went into purpose, where we covered, what is my piece? What is it about? How do I engage the reader? How do I present that to the reader through presentation? And then we discussed habits and attitudes that will maximize the results that you get in the writing process. For example, using a draft as a process to learn from your writing, not just to generate ideas, even though it does, but to see that the first draft is a learning process, and that's why multiple drafts are so important on almost any kind of writing. I hope that this course has given you some very specific insights. The quizzes and the exercises were meant to allow you to put the practices into action right away so that you can see results immediately, and that you'll be able to see the results from that very soon. In terms of this course, feel free to write me and offer suggestions for sections you would like to see in this course, or suggestions for new courses if you feel like there's something you would like to learn. I would be glad to put together courses based on multiple requests for specific lessons. That's what I do. That's what I enjoy doing. It's my passion. I want to help people succeed. I want to help you succeed. And the more people that I can get this out to, the better, because that means that I'm helping more people achieve their goals. And that is so important to me. Also, if you feel free to write me with suggestions to improve this course, or to tell me what this course has done to help you specifically. There is nothing more gratifying for a teacher, at least speaking for myself, than success stories and people saying thank you. That helped me so much. It made such a difference to me. It's more gratifying than any financial reward or anything like that, and I love to hear those stories. So if you have anything like that, then I would love to hear them. Also, keep in mind that this is the light and the shortened version of Become a Professional Writer. So if you feel like this course is something you would like to go into more in depth, then consider taking that course as well. And before you leave, if you would, please take a few minutes and write an honest review of the course. That gives me an opportunity to improve this course and to improve future courses for you, the student, so that I can help you maximize your success even more so. And it helps me to improve as a teacher, and so I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking this time to be with me. As you take the materials from this course, feel free to go back and rewatch any of them at any point if you need to brush up. Start applying this stuff right away based on the exercises. And keep in mind that each of these different strategies is not a catch-all. Keep in mind that you have to look at the context of the situation because it may not apply in every situation. So one of the best practices is to make it a daily practice, the techniques in this course, and also to keep in mind that you need to look at the context of the situation to know how to apply each technique or strategy and also whether or not it applies at all. And if you do that, I think you'll see very good results in your writing, and you'll see that play out in the areas where effective writing is so necessary. And so thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today, and I appreciate it, and have a great day.